All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Fresh Takes. And today we're going to have a great speaker on here because Fresh Takes, we've got professional speakers, business owners, entrepreneurs who are going to teach you about the art and the business of professional speaking. And today I've got a gentleman I met about 4.5 years ago. We were actually showcasing at a youth leadership conference, and we just hit it off really well, and we become friends, and it's been fun to watch how both our careers have grown. So he is a entertainer. He walks on stilts. He juggles. He is a DJ. He is a youth professional speaker. He is a member of the National Speakers Association, and he is an author of the book called Permission to Play. So ladies and gentlemen, I've bragged enough about him. Put your hands together for my good friend, Mr. Joe Fingerhut.
Yeah, I love that. What a great intro, Frank.
Hey, thank you so much. So once again, Joe, I've got you on here, and I gave you the big, over-the-top intro like we do as speakers. Right before we come on stage, people talk about how great you are, who you are, put you up on this big pedestal. And then you probably are in the back going, okay, let me tell you who I really am. So
Right.
for everybody watching this and listening to this right now, let people know, who is Joe Fingerhut? Who do you talk to? What makes you just smile in life? Who are you really?
Well, yesterday, as you saw, I posted like the source of my happiness lately. And it's, so I'm a dad. I have an 11-year-old boy who's in 6th grade and an 8-year-old girl who's in 3rd grade. And of course, my wife is out of grade school. And there's this trampoline park in St. Louis called Flying Spider. And, I've blown out both my knees playing basketball, and I'm 42, and I'm like, I want to exercise. I love being physically active, but there's only so many things you can do. But this trampoline park is where it's at, man. I go, and as we've talked about, I'm like the oldest person there, and kids are just like, how old are you? Oh, yeah, you're doing good. You're doing good. So that's just a source, like I said, of happiness lately. As my kids are at school, I am on the phone and emailing people to connect and see how I can impact their group. Whether it's, my main focus of my efforts is motivational speaking. I speak at conferences. I speak at a lot of teen leadership conferences, but I also do assemblies at schools, high schools, middle schools, and elementary schools. I've been getting involved the last year or two in adult and corporate events as well. And I've got some opportunities coming up. I'm really excited about that. And I just talk about my journey, my lessons that I've learned, just pursuing my passions, and hopefully inspiring other people that life is an opportunity. Like, let's get out there. Let's make the most of this opportunity.
Love it. So with that being said, I know people, when you go out there and speak, and they always have the number one question is how do you get into this? So how did you get into motivational speaking? Because obviously you're a dad, you're an entertainer, you're a trampoline jumper, but how do you become a motivational speaker?
In college, a motivational speaker came to our school. I went to Loyola University, Chicago, and this guy came and spoke, and I was like, you can do that as a career? But that just planted the seed, and it stuck in my head for about 15 years. And actually, that speaker, I think you know him, it's Patrick Combs.
Oh,
He's
yeah.
a very influential person in both of our lives. And so I stayed in touch with him and kind of kept him on the radar and stuff, but it was just like an idea that marinated. And what I have really been inspired by is just being in front of people. I've always enjoyed being in front of people. I wanted to be in front of people, and it was just an exploration of how can I get to do that. And so after college, I backpacked through Europe, and then I moved to Japan and taught English. And in the 8 years after college, I ended up going to 30 countries on 6 continents, just continuing to explore. And then I married a woman I met in Japan, a nice Japanese woman named Michio. We came back and got married, and I was like, what do I do? And the DJ at our wedding reception was amazing. And I was like, I want to do that. That looks fun. So I came up to him afterwards. I'm like, how can I do this? So a month later, he's training me. Then a couple months later, I'm like, well, people don't get married during the week. I got to do something. So I found an ad in the newspaper. It said, after school magic instructor wanted, 1 to 4 hours a week. We teach you the tricks. So I called them up. I said, how can I do this? And so I started doing that, teaching after school classes, summer camps, magic, juggling. And then I started doing shows, and I'm just making a living in front of people. And I was like, I can do it. So that lasted a couple of years, and I was like, I want to do more than entertain. I want to have an impact. So I started honing in and focusing, how do speakers make a living doing this? And I'd go to conferences and I'd watch these speakers and I'd visualize, like, I can do that. I don't know how yet, but I'm gonna figure out how. And then connect with speakers like you, speakers like the people that are in our network now. Hey, how do you do this? And eventually reaching out to people who have speakers, teachers, conference planners, and just being like, this is what I do. How about we work together?
Love it. Yeah, I love sharing with people who ask about the speaking, and I explain to them that, you know, your story is the most powerful thing that you have. So I love, you know, one of the themes of your program is, you know, how can I? And
Yep.
essentially, you've done all this stuff in your life where I know you can tell people a little bit more here in a second, but riding a unicycle, traveling around, international family, doing. I think I saw you doing a show in Japan where you did the show in Japanese.
Yeah.
So it's like, you know, but it's like almost like you see it and then you go out and do it and live it. So explain to everybody a little bit about this. How can I?
Yeah, the umbrella message. Every time I get on stage, my big takeaway. I'm really straightforward with it. I'm just like, we don't have a whole lot of time here, but if you get nothing else out of today, there is a mindset of limitations, excuses, and problems. And it comes down to two words, and that's I can't. We all have that. That's our resistance voice. And, you know, the old Henry Ford quote, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you are right. So if you find reasons to fail, you will fail. And so I just say my challenge is to erase those two words from your vocabulary and replace them with three words. Simple question: how can I? And when you program your brain to think like that, you're approaching opportunities not focused on limitations, excuses, but opportunities and solutions and partnerships, resources to find ways to do it. And that has driven all of my experiences. Well, yeah, rather than how can I? Like, I'm not gonna. There's a million reasons why I can't, but it sounds cool, and I don't have all the answers, but the answers are out there. So how can I do that? And I just repeat that process over and over, and it's been really helpful to the audiences that I've spoken to. A lot of teachers come up after I'm in schools, and they're just like, "That's so powerful." That's essentially what I'm trying to say, but you've distilled it so simply into how can I.
Yeah, love it. And, you know, obviously you get a lot of people probably just, I don't want to say, you know, just drool over you, but, you know, they see you up on stage and, you know, you get to travel around the country and do all these pieces and they're like, okay, I want to be like you. But then, as you said, they'll come up with these mental excuses like, I can't.
Yeah.
Now for you, I know one of the biggest struggles is, and like you said, you have to figure out how can I, is I know you travel a lot. You know, you work all around the country. So explain to people listening to this one right now or watching this, how can they, or what do you do to help balance this whole work-life balance? Because I know I'll see you speaking somewhere like late night doing like a midnight show, but then the next day you're at your kid's school helping out with something there. So how do you, or how can I better learn how to balance out my work life, which I love, but also my family's life?
Sure. Balance is a dangerous word, and I don't even try to use it. I prefer a mix.
A mix, okay.
Like, the word is a mix. And my clarity on priorities has always been very strong. And my whole life, I've wanted to be a dad. Like, that's the job that I have aspired to. I loved my dad. My parents were amazing. They provided us with so many opportunities and so many lessons. They weren't perfect. No parents are perfect. But I just always wanted to do that. And being a dad, of course, means being a husband, being the best husband that I can be, and constantly seeking to improve that. So that's just, okay, family. And my kids, you know, my kids aren't babies anymore. As you know, it's a little easier to be like, all right, honey, there's some dirty diapers, you got to feed them. I got a gig over here. But now they're 11 and 8. They need us. They need us as dads. They need us as parents, as moms and dads. And so I'm just like, whenever I can, I'm going to be there. And in my Google Calendar it has everything. I live by it. I have programmed in walk kids to the bus stop and pick them up. And it's just repeat to the end of the school year. Now, that doesn't mean nothing's going to come in the way of that. Obviously, we all have to make a living. And if I get booked, the kids know I'm not going to be there. They understand what I do. But that's just one example of priorities. I know that's the priority of being there for them. Last year, I took the plunge. I coached both of their basketball teams, which was tough fitting in to the schedule. But I was just like, how can I do this? What is the worst thing that's going to happen? And I had, worked with some assistant coaches being like, I'm going to be out of town this time, but we're going to make it work. And so how do you mix it? You prioritize and you do your best. And I like to focus on what's going to keep me content and happy. Yep. You and I both know people whose speaking careers are really thriving, and they're doing 150 dates in the year, 200 dates. And that's cool. And I don't begrudge them that at all, but I'm just like, I know that's not for me. I just know that I want to be here.
Yeah. Yeah. And I like what you said it by putting it in the calendar there, as you've said, and even some of the people I coach with, is like, it's almost like once you put it in the calendar, it shows that it's important. But if you don't have it, then you will find other ways to fill that calendar up. And, I know my kids are a little behind yours in age, but for anybody looking to go into the speaking game, as you said, when they're younger, they don't necessarily miss you, but as you start to get older, they want to know where you are. They want to be a part of the process. And it's tough to leave the house some days because they're like, hey, can I go?
And Frank, it's astounding, as you either know or are going to find out, like, sometimes you're just like, why do you love me so much? And I'm not saying that in any kind of cocky way. It's just, I tell them, well, I got a day trip tomorrow. So Tuesday I was in Iowa, and I was speaking at a school this week, a couple days ago. And, it's funny, I told them on Monday, I'm like, well, I'm probably not going to see you tomorrow. And they both, I'm like, really? Like, that's awesome. Thank you for loving me. It's amazing. So that really, like you said, it makes it hard to leave sometimes. But when everybody's on the same page. So my family, the way that the path that we're on, my wife is from Japan. My kids are fully bilingual. We've made the effort to have both cultures really prominent, American and Japanese culture, in our lives. And so we spend about 6 weeks every year in Japan. And that is our time together. And anytime there's sacrifice in the rest of the year, we're always like, hey, this is so that we can go to Japan. Yeah. So daddy's going to be gone for a day or two. That's what it's got to be,
Yep. Yeah. And as you said, as you said, I love the word you said, it's a mix, and we have to, mix it in. And that's why we're doing these, interviews and these talks here, Fresh Takes, because I want people to see not just all, quote, the glam and glitz. Oh, yeah, glam and glitz is fun, but there's a lot more going on behind the scenes. Like, quote, us on stage is the tip of the iceberg.
Oh, yeah.
There's so much more beneath the water. So transitioning a little bit as you're talking about that speaking, piece. And, I know right now, predominantly you're in the youth market, but you do speak for different adult groups, based off of who invites you in. But for the people listening and watching, explain to them, we're not going to talk bad about it, but explain to them the truth about you speaking. Because I know a lot of people are like, I want to go talk to this youth group. And I told them, the youth group is probably one of the toughest groups to keep engaged, because sometimes, you've got an assembly or gym full of people and they don't necessarily want to be there. So tell people, the truth about youth speaking and what you really have to do to connect and engage.
Young people, teenagers, if you're not yourself, if you don't speak with integrity and just if you're in it for the wrong reasons, or they can sniff it out if you're not legit. And by legit, I mean just like, if you're not being real, if you're trying to fake it, basically, like, they want real. And the difference between youth and adults are polite. Adults will sit there and they'll give you the smile and the nod, and they have the capacity to mentally, like, maybe I'm somewhere else or whatever, if they're not into you. With youth, so there's two types of youth environments. One is like a conference, and one is a school. And as you very well know, I always tell people, the school, the best thing you have going for you is that they get to miss math at 9 a.m. They don't know who you are. They're just like, I don't know, but I don't have math today. It's good, And so you really have to break through and be like, I'm here. I have energy. I want the best for you. And here's how you're going to benefit from this. And like any humans, they love stories. So you jump in, with stories, with interaction, with activity, get them moving. That helps. Now, the other one then is conferences. And conferences are something not that they have to go to, they get to go to. And that's when you get kids that are fired up and they're, yeah. And that's the energy. Those are fantastic. Plus, from a business perspective, at a school, everybody's from the same source. But at a conference, that has lots of groups represented. So you can affect a lot of different communities. You have the opportunity to do that.
Yeah, and that's the one thing I always try to explain to people. They ask about our careers. I told people, it's like, as you said, my nephew even told me, he came to one of my presentations before, he's in college now, and he goes, you know what, Frank? He goes, he's like, as youth, he goes, we are natural BS detectors.
Oh yeah.
And he goes, he's like, we can see through it. And I see a lot of people who want to try to jump into this youth motivational speaking, and essentially they flop because they try to go in there with a shirt and tie and be very business and professional, and the kids are already tune them out.
Oh yeah.
Where I have watched you, and this is where I'm going to ask you to share a little bit of advice here. I've watched you go into rooms, and obviously you have your program called Play, but I also know there's a thing where you have a unicycle, or you've come in on stilts or juggling. I mean, so share with people right now, like, what are some of the, we don't want to just go in there and just, to quote, have fun, but we use fun to open the doors to teach. So what are some of the engagement pieces that you do, and then how do you transition to turn that fun into actually learning?
Right. So first of all, if anybody's listening or watching and just caught Frank saying unicycle, stilts, magic, I know that your brain is you might be just jumping, oh, I don't have that. I don't relate. I can't do that. So those happen to be some skills, but you do not need those skills to be an effective speaker to youth or any audience. For me, it has helped a lot, but I will tell you the story of my first paid speaking engagement. My cousin is a teacher at a middle school, and he's like, do you speak at middle school? So I'm like, yes. And they scrounged together some funds, and I get there, and I was like, oh, I want to be a speaker. And I was a speaker, and I spoke, and I told stories. I think I did maybe one magic trick or something. And then it went really well. They were into it. It was 8th graders. And I was like, all right, any questions? And they had some questions, and that led into me telling the story of how I learned to ride a unicycle. I wasn't planning on telling that story. I had not brought my unicycle, but I told the story, and everybody's like, oh, great. So where is it? And I was like, it's at my house, and I'm like, I will never not bring a unicycle if I'm going to tell the unicycle story. And how that relates to everybody, because not everybody rides a unicycle, we all have talents and experiences. And people are naturally curious about what makes you tick, what you are skilled at, and also the art of telling a story. You can make anything sound amazing. Like, you could be an expert gardener, and you can make it dramatic. There's ways to do it. Like, I didn't think it was going to happen, and there was a lot on the line, and next thing you know, roses or something. It's about passion and storytelling, and that comes with practice and training and reaching out and coaching and study.
Yeah. So as you say that thing at the study, and we can probably name drop a couple things, but as you said, you've been studying a lot of speakers, but once again, we're doing this to help, future speakers. Who are some of the people who you have studied? So maybe drop some names of who you've studied, or maybe if you can really explain, like, when you go to watch another speaker, what do you study? Like, what have you done to make yourself better?
So I've invested in several coaches over the years. And I've found that when I had a specific objective, a coach has helped me get that done. I've hired a speaking coach, a business coach, a book writing coach. I knew that I needed to get help and accountability in that area. So I'll cut through it all and give you the one nugget that somebody can take from this. And actually, I learned it from Patrick Combs. And once he told me, he's like, this is going to change everything on how you view speakers and how you tell stories. But essentially, when I first started, I was telling a bunch of stories. I was like, I got all these stories. It's so cool, so cool. And there's lots of lessons involved. And I'd get feedback from speaker friends that I'd ask, like, what did you think? And they're like, well, you got great stories. What are you saying? I'm like, don't you get it? I mean, this story was about adversity, and this story was about belief and confidence. And they're like, humans have to have our messages delivered on a platter. And so I learned through Patrick Combs, and then practice after that. Tell a story in 5 to 7 minutes, and then turn it on them, how it relates. I am a huge Michael Jordan fan. Best athlete ever. I went to college in Chicago so I could see the Bulls play. He could be the speaker, and he could sit there and tell all of his stories, and it would be good. But I'm still sitting there, and the audience is, okay, how does this relate to me? What about me? What about me? What about me? another speaker, Clint Pulver, who's doing great things right now. I think he told me, he's like, yeah, you're sitting there. Wake me up when it applies to me. I'm just sitting here, you know? So that's the best thing I can tell anybody getting into speaking. You can tell any story you want. You could have climbed Mount Everest, but you got to be like, now here's how it applies to you.
And it's funny as you said that, because I wasn't even expecting you to say that, but I went and watched the speaker and he talked about climbing Mount Everest.
Yeah.
And he gave the whole deal, and like, you know, he talked about, you know, death-defying things and, you know, how hard it was to go up there and people almost dying. And that was the speech. And we all did sit there. And one of the first comments I heard from somebody was, oh, great. Taught us how to climb Mount Everest, but how does that relate to what I do?
Yeah,
and
totally.
Yeah, and that's the big deal. It's like, you know, explain to people, you said, whether it be the stories or activities, there has to be some type of debrief, or as you said, you know, the relatable piece. So as you said, we could, you know, and I'm going to go back to your unicycle just because I've seen you on it, is like you said, you could go ride the unicycle across the stage, but it doesn't mean anything until you tie in the back piece of going, hey, if something looks impossible, you have to put the work in. Have you ever had anything that looks impossible, but that you really wanted to do? And then you say, you know, how can I?
Yeah.
And boom, it's like, oh my God. And now all of a sudden your unicycle story has become the greatest story in the world, because I've seen Joe Fingerhut talk about, you know, how can I? And because he had a unicycle, but my deal is I want to be able to go to college. And it's funny to watch. You're like, well, how do you convert a unicycle into getting a college degree? But they do.
Yeah, it's incredible. My biggest career victory happened last year. I spoke and at this conference, and like an hour later, I got a text, and this teenager texted me, and he was like, "I love your message of how can I? My dream was to play college baseball, but I'm thinking of kind of giving up because it's hard to get scouts to come talk to me or come see me." And I thought about just giving him a, you know, simple, oh, thanks for, you know, good luck. But then I was like, man, he reached out and shared, so I'm gonna reach out and share it. And I was like, well, practice what you just heard. If they're not coming to you, go to them, call up a school, you know. So, and the next day he texts like, I got a workout scheduled in 2 days. And then he let me know on Saturday that he got like a scholarship to pitch for them for 4 years.
Yeah.
And obviously that had nothing to do with my unicycle. I talked about my unicycle that day, but he took the how can I from that and applied it to his own life. Because I make it a point at the, especially towards the end, I'm like, if you don't want to travel, if you don't want to learn other languages, if you don't want to do something like ride a unicycle, I'm not saying you have to do that. These were my dreams. I figured out how to make them happen. What is your dream? What are you building towards?
Right. I mean, and that's the piece where I tell people it is a legal high that we get as speakers, to where you see and you know, I don't want to say, quote, we're in the beauty pageant, because I always go, okay, what's the beauty pageant? You go, oh, to make the world a better place. But I mean, essentially that's why we get into this. And when you hear stories like that, I mean, you know, explain to the audience here, I'm like, how does that makes you sleep good at night, doesn't it?
Oh my gosh. It just makes it all worth it. Like if I'm feeling down, or if I'm just, things aren't really clicking or happening or something, like I affected that kid's life, you know, and then you will get emails and people come up to you at conferences and just being like, hey, that helped me. This is how it helped me. And it's awesome, because what we do, yes, it is a tremendous ego trip. We get to stand on stage and say, look what I did. Isn't this cool? But you are an effective speaker if you make the audience the focus of what you do. Like we are not effective. We are not good speakers if we're not doing this to help the audience.
Yeah. It can't all be all about you. You said it's got to be about them. But I want to, like, quote, lift up the veil or the curtains right now to go through, because you made a really good comment about, you know, emails, and, you know, this kid was a text message. But will you explain to people about, you know, the emails that you get, and the power of the fact that a lot of the emails that you get are people that you never talked to at the event?
Okay, so like, what do you mean after an event, somebody emails with...
You've got an event and you say, hey, please keep in contact with me. And then all of a sudden you get this email about how impactful your story was to their life. And I don't know how your wife is, but my wife will come up and goes like, oh, did you talk to them? Like, I never met them. I'm like,
right. I couldn't tell you who this is. So that specific kid who emailed me, I didn't even know his name. And then we were texting, and then he's like, I got offered a scholarship. And then I called him. I'm like, who is this? What is it like? Did we talk? Like, you know, so it's kind of funny. Usually I will know the venue and the event. People, hey, I saw you speak at this oh God, I remember that. And every once in a while, it'll stick out. Somebody makes their way up, and they'll, hey, my name's Tommy, and I want to do this or something. Like every once in a while, it'll stick out, and they'll reach out.
But yeah, I just noticed it seems like some of these really just deep, impactful people are the ones like, oh, you know what? The line was too long to come and talk to you afterwards, but I got your email, so I wanted to contact you.
Yeah.
And that's another amazing part about this too is, as you said about the ego trip, yeah, there's people who will stand and meet you afterwards. They want to take a picture with you. No one really asks for autographs. They just want to take a picture with you.
Right.
Say, hey, you were great. But it's funny, they do and don't keep in contact with you, but it's just that one person on the audience. I know you spoke to a group of 5,000 earlier this year, but you have one person in the 5,000 way in the upper deck because you're in an arena, and all of a sudden they'll email you, as you said, if you make it about them, or they go, hey, you know what? I was in the upper deck. I didn't get a chance to meet you, but I wanted to say thank you.
Yeah.
And, I mean, that just blows you away.
It does. And to be able to affect people like that is an incredible privilege. And I think it keeps you and I doing what we do, is the ability to help people. I mean, that's why we got into it in the first place.
Yep. So now this one I love having when I have speakers and like we talk, quote off the record, but I'm going to ask you to be on the record here.
Yeah.
But, we get some crazy adventures, doing this. So one is, how long have you been doing the whole professional speaking deal? But then two is, what's just one crazy story that has happened, during your travels where you're like, oh my God, I can't believe that happened?
Okay, so part one, in December, it will be like my 10-year speaker birthday.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you. And that is the day that I invested in a conference. I got on a plane, I got a hotel, and I paid for this conference on the business of speaking, like how to make a living doing this. And I sat in this room, and that I was like, okay. And I think the guy putting it on was like, you are a speaker now, go for it. But the moment that really took it over the top, Jack Canfield spoke. And, Chicken Soup for the Soul guy. And he got on stage, and that was the epitome of, people won't remember what you say, people remember how you made them feel. And I hadn't had dinner yet. It was an evening. I'm like, I'll get dinner afterwards. I went back to my room like for 4 hours. I just took notes and voice recorded. This is what I see for my career. This is what I want to do. And so a couple months later, I had my first paid gig. So that was about 10 years ago. Probably a crazy event. It's hard to say the craziest, but we're going to Japan a couple years ago, my wife and my 2 kids, and it's gonna be in the spring, in March and April. And before, like about a month or 2 before, I get a lead about a conference happening in Malaysia. We're having a conference for students. And I was like, yeah, I just blew it off. Like, I can't do that. But after a couple hours, I'm like, wait, why would I not? Like, I would love to get accepted and then have to evaluate whether or not I can make it or not. Like, let them tell me I'm not good enough. I'm not going to. So I reached out, and it led to this communication. And it totally felt like one of those emails you get, like, hey, you're related to a prince that died, and you have $5.7 million coming to you if you send me. And that was I was like, wait, but it never happened that way. It just became more, I was like, I'm going to say yes until this doesn't happen. And it happened, Frank. I got hired to speak at a conference at a school in Malaysia. And it was so funny. I got to tell them, how sometimes when you book a gig, and then let's say, I know you're in the Phoenix area, say you book a gig in, I don't know, Maine, right? And you can call the other schools in the area or whatever and be like, hey, I'm going to be in the neighborhood. I was able to tell them, well, hey, it's on that date. I'm going to be in Asia. I was coming to Japan. And so I ended up, I talked to my wife. I'm like, do you mind if I just take a quick trip while we're in Japan to go work in Malaysia? She's like, yeah, that's fine. So I go to Malaysia. And Frank, I may as well have been Tony Robbins, because I was the professional speaker from Malaysia. They had put my face on a banner. They were like, Mr. Joe. And I spoke to 400 college students in Malaysia. And it worked great. Like, everybody there speaks like 5 languages. English is one of the prominent ones, so it was fine. And I made it like a 4 or 5 day trip. My favorite part, I come back to Japan where we're staying with my in-laws, and in Japanese, my wife's dad and I have this conversation. He's like, "Oh, that was a work trip, huh?" I'm like, "Yep, that was a business trip." He goes, "What was it for again?" I'm like, "Oh, it was a conference." He's like, "So conference, what, a couple hours long?" I'm like, "Yep." And he's like, "And what did you do?" I'm like, "Well, I spoke." "How long did you speak?" "About an hour." He's like, "You were gone 4 days?" I'm like, "Yep." So
Love
I
it.
got to see some of the country. It was awesome.
So see, when I go re-edit this, I'm gonna have to say Joe Fingerhut, international speaker.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes.
International. Thank you very much.
And,
Yeah.
and you know, as we laugh about this, you and I've had these conversations. Is this very much is a smoke and mirrors business where many of the speakers I know, we have we have smaller egos than you expect.
Yeah.
So we don't think about, as you said, I went and spoke in Malaysia, but the audiences who want to book us in want this big piece. So whether you've been seen on a TV show, have you spoken in Malaysia or spoken in Japan, like you said to us, we're like, oh yeah, I've done that. But for everybody else, I mean, explain that piece there. Just like how there's certain things like if you've been seen on TV, it's like people are like, oh my God, you've been seen on TV.
Yeah. It's all smoke and mirrors, man. One of my favorite quotes, and I was told this very early, was this is show business.
Yeah.
And within that phrase, show business, if you're lucky, 10% is the show, 90% is the business. And that's what it is. I mentioned before, my kids are at school. What am I doing? I'm emailing. I'm making phone calls. This is the grind.
Yeah.
But you have to love it to keep you going. If you truly hate it, you're just not going to do it. And it is not that I love it, but I love the result. We love being on stage. We love being able to help people. And a lot of times it's not glamorous. It's checking in to the flights and going through security or getting the rental car and driving a couple hours. But it is an amazing opportunity that we have. And then certain opportunities will pop up. Like sometimes a trip is a day trip and it's travel, speak, travel, go home. But every once in a while, you get to go. I went to this conference in Montana and they wanted me to speak. And I get there. It's a long trip to Montana. I do my first session and they're like, all right, well, you can rest. You probably don't want to be involved in our next activity. I'm like, well, what are you guys doing? They're like, it's a zip line through the woods. I'm like, what? Can I do that? They're like, you want to? I'm like, yes. So get there with the zip line. Like, all right, we'll see you at dinner. Go to dinner. Joe, you can go and relax tonight. You probably don't want to come with us. I'm like, what are you doing tonight? We're doing a paintball war in the woods. I'm like, what? So you get to do that. Just opportunities pop up. You keep it going. And then those opportunities drive you to make more emails and make more calls and spend more time building the business.
Yeah, and that's the piece is like, you said those experiences of speaking, that's literally the icing on the cake. But, I love to share, you can tell me a percentage, but I tell people probably 80% of what we do is actually trying to get the work. We probably only speak, perform maybe 10 to 20% of the time.
Yeah. Or less. It's like, 60 to 70% is a business. Then, 10 to 20% is travel. And like 5% is like the spotlight, the microphone on stage.
Oh yeah, it's funny. I explained to my wife, like I've got an event coming up in a few weeks in Texas, and quite literally, I think I'll be on the stage for 15 minutes.
Right.
But between the travel and going back and forth, it's going to be a day and a half for a case where it's like this one is like on a fundraising side, but just to help them speak and help them raise their funds is almost like 15 minutes and out.
Right.
And
it's so similar
with the planning.
It's so similar. Like when you grow up, you have all these visions of what people are doing. And as a kid, I was like, oh man, NBA, I'm gonna be a professional athlete. Or you might think I want to be a movie star. Athletes, their job is to travel. That's all they do. NBA guys play 82 games a year in the regular season. That's not preseason, that's not playoffs. They're traveling to get there. It is such a grind. Movie stars, you go to a movie theater, you see 3 hours of Avengers. You're like, oh man, that's awesome. It must be cool. But shooting a movie is such a grind. It's cut. Okay, we're acting for 5 seconds at a time, a minute at a time. Then you got to wait like a year or two for post-production, all that stuff. So the glamorous jobs in our society, they all are, there's an element of here's what you see, and it's the tip of the iceberg. What's underneath is everything you don't see.
Yep. Well then, Mr. Joe Fingerhut, international speaker, speaking of this iceberg, I'm going to ask you to share maybe two parts of the iceberg that most people don't see, because with this iceberg, with this speaking game, we have the professional side of the iceberg and the art side of the iceberg. So we've got the art of speaking and the professional part of speaking, or the business side of speaking. So for everybody watching, listening to this right now, what's one nugget that you would like to share to improve on the art of speaking, but then also one nugget to improve on the business of speaking?
So one nugget on the art, just practice. And by practice, get on stage. And when I say on stage, it doesn't have to be an actual elevated platform in front of a bunch of people. You could be speaking to 10 people. I always encourage people, if you're starting, if you haven't spoken, you have teachers in your life. We all have teachers in our life. Call up a teacher, send an email. Hey, could I be a guest speaker in your class? Teachers want you to come in. That gives you a chance to practice your craft. If you get offered a stage, take it, pay or not. Just get those reps, but be intentional about it. Record yourself, watch yourself, ask people what stuck out to you. Because the only way you're going to see what's effective is asking people what you took from it, what sticks with you, and then just pay attention. You know, are you getting emails a year or two later? Like, hey, we saw you at our conference 2 years ago. We want to book you again, or we want to have you for this event. Then things are going to click. And just so seek out, improve. How can I improve?
How can
So
I?
that's the art. Business, ask. If you want to be a speaker, you've got to have a website and a video. That's it. You don't exist without it. Speaker, oh, where can I see you speak? Oh, well, you can have me at your event. Okay, great. What do you speak? Like, what is where? Here's my stuff. Here's my website. Here's my video. Doesn't have to be fancy. I mean, we just talked about, I just made my new video, and it's based on the event I spoke in front of 5,000 people in April, my biggest event ever. But I got that with a simpler video. You know, you have to have a video, you have to have a website. So just get out there and then ask. Tell everybody what you do. I'm a speaker. You might be an accountant wanting to get into speaking. So stop telling people you're an accountant. Just, I'm a speaker. Oh, yeah? Yeah. Who do you know? Ask.
Yep. So speaking of ask, you've shared a ton of great information. I'm sure people want to ask you more. And I know that you've actually helped at some points either mentor or coach people. For everybody who's really gotten a lot out of this interview, what is the best way to get in contact or to follow Joe Fingerhut?
All social media at Joe Fingerhut, J-O-E, finger like on your hand, H-U-T, or joefingerhut.com. That's where everything lives, and that's where everything will continue to be shared. And if you follow me on social media, you'll see things like, as Frank knows, a couple times a year, I walk to my kids' bus stop on stilts. That's fun. Trampoline park videos, travel videos, just pictures and experiences and stuff.
Showing that whole life. So Joe, you know, once again, I put this Fresh Takes together to help people improve their life in the art and the business of speaking. And I always want to leave people with that call to action, that, you know, this poignant piece to go home, because you said we can't just have the fun. We have to give them something that it really is impactful to, as we say, to you, which is them. So before we end this interview, what's just one line, one phrase, one statement you'd like to make to our audience to help them improve in the art and the business of speaking? Do
something scary today. There's something that's in your heart that you know that, like, okay, making that phone call, reaching out to that person, or researching that, getting into that, like, you know, how can I take that next step? You know what it is, and there's a fear there. So just, what is that scary thing? Just do that. Do something scary today. There it is, everybody. So this has been Joe Fingerhut, Frank Kitchen here for Fresh Takes. And as Joe said, ladies and gentlemen, once you stop listening to this or watching this, go out there and do something scary today. Thank you so much, Joe. All right. Thank you, Frank. Boom.